Dear Spine community, I welcome you to our podcast series. Spine is the first global search engine focused on alternative healing, spirituality, and consciousness. Spine connects providers with seekers, and in this podcast, we introduce you to the people of the network, their stories, and their insights. I wish that Spine brings you a lot of inspiration in your life and perhaps also opens up many new paths for you. In this spirit, enjoy listening. Yours, Sylvia Leifheit.
I welcome you to another episode of the Spine Interviews. Today we are talking about the topic of regressions, and for that we have the leading expert in the German-speaking area as our guest. She has already conducted over 6,500 spiritual regressions and performs extremely important work on the path to self-discovery, as well as in trauma and grief management. Over 52 million people already know her from many TV documentaries such as My First Life, Rebirth, or The Genke Experiment. And how important and life-changing a journey into one's past lives and the afterlife can be, we will discuss together with her today. Also, and I highly appreciate this, she is a true supporter of Spine, and that's why I am especially looking forward to her now. Welcome, Ursula Demarmels.
Very nice. I'm also really happy to be here.
Hello, Ursula. Regression. For most people, that's not tangible at first. They can't imagine what it is. What exactly does it mean? Why does it exist? And what is done there? Please start by explaining a bit to people what exactly are regressions.
Regression, spiritual regression as I call it, are journeys into one's own past. That means it requires us to go beyond just our current self in the body we currently have. We travel back through time to a point where we are not yet born, not yet reincarnated in this body. This naturally presupposes the existence of a soul. Something that is immortal, something that incarnates repeatedly in different times in different bodies to gather experience. And in a spiritual regression, I guide people into a spiritual trance and then back through time. First through the current life, youth, childhood, into the womb, and further back before conception. So, to where we are in the afterlife, in the spiritual world, the mental world, as divine souls. And then further back into one of our past lives. It could be the last life we had before this current life on earth. It could be one from prehistoric times, so to speak, from the Middle Ages. We incarnate in both genders, so both male and in other lives, female. We get to know both sides, and the task would be to develop in each life where we incarnate. Develop in the sense of our divine soul. So gain more consciousness, more compassion, more creativity, more strength, more joy, more wisdom, until one day we no longer incarnate as spiritual teachers, guides to come to earth once more for a project.
That means for you, is the human being in their body really just a kind of, template of something that is behind it with which you actually work?
I would like to say, as humans, we always feel that we are humans, and there is also a spiritual world. But in reality, we are spiritual beings and incarnate with parts of our divine soul on earth, in our humanity. Everything on earth, including animals and plants, is part of, if you will, the greater whole, and they are spiritual beings. In that sense, nothing is mortal. The shell dies, the material form, or transforms, one might say, goes into other forms, or returns to components and forms new bodies. But the immortal, the divine soul, is something completely different. It is subject neither to space, nor time, nor forms.
Yes, but that's what I mean. Can you even still see people as people? Or do you mostly see this behind, this energy that is always divinely incarnated?
I would like to say, as Ursula on earth, I see the outer form, but I cannot help that I very, very often also perceive the divine soul very quickly, or the potential that this person could bring to earth. And it often pains me so much to see the opportunities everyone has, how wonderful it could be, the harmony we could live in for ourselves, that it benefits us, for our fellow humans, the animals, nature, the big picture. And how many people, yes, sometimes develop in the wrong direction or remain stagnant or bet on the wrong horse in the truest sense of the word. And unfortunately, for most, this continues until they have died or perhaps at the moment of dying. And what always particularly touches and shakes me is when I realize I am now leading someone back to one of their past lives and they realize after death, oh my God, when the divine soul knows again, what have I done? What could I have done? What kind of bright, great, creative, joyful contribution could I have made? Where have I gotten stuck in striving for power or feelings of inferiority or arrogance, hard-heartedness, indifference? But then comes the great desire. This time I'll do it better. This time I'll do it differently.
Have you often experienced that people felt such regret during the regressions?
Of course, thank God there are also past lives where we can say, I did great. Even the divine instance of our spiritual guides, guardian angels, or whatever you want to call them, is satisfied. As a divine soul, one thinks, wow, I have fulfilled everything, all my life tasks, everything we had planned. But tell me, we have a life plan, life tasks as divine souls, and I have fulfilled it. Those are, of course, wonderful moments. And unfortunately, there are also very often times when one says, oh dear, I got stuck somewhere. Sometimes it's not even the big, terrible things we've done, like tormenting other living beings, but very often it's the sins of omission. We have done too little with our potential. We looked away when we should have looked. We made ourselves comfortable. We didn't pull the trick on the plug, the bad guys of history, but we got stuck either in the comfort zone or in, oh, I'm just a little mouse. Or we have only done good just as far as the tip of our nose for me and my family, friends, and maybe the pets, but no further, so to speak, not beyond the city gate. And if you are the damsel, have you ever stood in front of the city gate? Who is lying there in rags? Who is rummaging through the trash? Who is begging? And that is what infinitely hurts the soul.
Do you have an answer as to why that happens?
That is a difficult question, so I can only give you a few things now, otherwise it will skip. It is part of life as a human on earth that for almost all people, I would say 99.99%, the great forgetting comes after birth or after the first years. Because if we knew what karmic consequences our actions and inactions have, we would all be pure angels here, but we wouldn't learn anything. We would never truly come into love. It would be a calculation. It's like if you smoked and immediately got lung cancer, no one would smoke. But one has the feeling, oh, well, maybe someday. Or my grandfather died at 96 from something completely different, not from lung cancer. He passed away peacefully in bed. And it is about us as divine souls freely submitting our will, I would say, to the divine plan of creation. So that at some point in spiritual development, a person reaches the point where they do not say, my will be done, but thy will be done. That he sees himself as a tool of the spiritual world, that he even senses or feels we are all one, human, animal, nature, the whole, the entire universe, and no one is better or worse. And that we develop compassion within us to the point where we say, I can be at my best when everyone else is also doing well. And if someone is not doing well, the desire to help immediately arises. That would be the task, that we voluntarily return to our soul qualities, joy, love, kindness, helpfulness, creativity. The Earth is a very difficult planet, a fascinating planet. We can develop ourselves extremely here, but we can also get stuck here. On Earth, we have free will, and many people feel I can do whatever I want, period. But it is a comma sentence with all karmic consequences, good karma and bad karma.
Can one then say that these people perhaps simply in quotation marks have not yet become aware of their potential, but have also not yet reached the point where the cosmos, fate calls them to truly wake up, I would say, so to really consciously work on not wasting the potential, right?
That is a very good question, and I think a large part of our misfortunes is based on being shaken up, wake up already, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I often have the pleasure of working with people where you get the feeling that they are not infinitely educated, conscious people, have never read a book in any direction or watched any television show. But they feel their soul and they have a conscience. And if we nurture our conscience, that is the link, so to speak, to our soul. If we constantly define ourselves only by the external or by comparison, or simply rely on externalities, then our conscience is often more and more absent, and especially groups that are actually very important. But if a group has no ethical goals and we attach ourselves to the group, we want to belong, then we often make endlessly lazy compromises, and over time we have truly lost our conscience and our access to it. And then it's often really the truly severe blows of fate or losses that happen to you. Or it happens, the feeling that many people have when they get a bit older, was that really all? That can't have been everything. That such a feeling of emptiness comes. Exactly, that they then start searching again.
Could it be that you are conveying to us here that suffering, in whatever form, smaller or larger suffering, is even an important component of the soul's growth?
If the soul, one might say, is stubborn and otherwise doesn't get going, yes. But we could spare ourselves a lot of suffering if we didn't sometimes really refuse and resist to hear the finer signs.
I understand. Let's talk a bit more about regression, how exactly it works, so people can understand, so they can contact you and then arrange a session. Please explain a bit more in detail how something like that works, so they can visualize it a bit better, how it goes.
So I always wish that before people come to our workshops for spiritual regressions or even to an individual session, they first read my books. Who was I in a past life? The positive effect of spiritual regressions, and then building on that. Karma coaching, ways out of the fate trap. Another, the second regression book. And then you already know much more in theory about why you do it, how you do it, and how the healing is involved, the spiritual healing. And when you come, you simply start at a much higher level. So you don't have to explain everything, which would take many hours, but can start much more with the practical work. I then guide the client into a spiritual trance, but they remain aware and can get up or leave at any time. You can perhaps imagine it like watching an exciting movie. You're completely focused on the film, but you notice someone eating popcorn, another has tacos, and someone arrives late to the cinema. You do notice it, but it's not that important to you. You're completely immersed in the action. So it is an interesting thing in the brain. We are, so to speak, on two sides. We are one part, it goes free, are others there? And then I quickly connect the client with their divine soul and their soul guide. If that has succeeded, it continues back through the current life. youth, childhood, womb, and then back to one of the past lives. I always leave it to the soul guide, guardian angel to choose the life for the client, where he thinks the past life, because we have infinitely many, is most beneficial for his current life and his next development steps. This can then go very far back or be one of his last, if you see time causally, past lives. Then I look at this past life. We travel back and forth in time, which we ultimately turn into a cross-section through the whole life, through all time. And then comes the last day, the last hour, and the death scene. And the client experiences once more how they died in the past life, how they left the body, until they realize they are not dead at all. They can now see their body from the outside, but they feel more alive, freer, better than ever. The brilliance of the soul returns, the memory. That would be the journey into the past life. Beyond that, well, that would be, after hours have passed, a new appointment where we continue the journey into the beyond, into the spiritual world. What do I do as a divine soul? Who am I there? Do I also have tasks there? Also a soul group? How do I plan my next life? Why do I incarnate as female or male? What are my life tasks and goals in this time, with these possibilities, with this brain? What have I planned to continue growing? And continuing to grow always means this is not an ego trip. That always means more and more I develop a feeling for my fellow humans, for the animals, especially the so-called livestock, so that there will be no need for them anymore, because our animal husbandry is an abomination of deeply fallen humanity. The environment that we are destroying, so we gain compassion and a broader perspective, and also see our positive contribution according to our possibilities. Those are fulfilled lives, happy lives, when we follow the path of the soul.
Have you ever experienced, because it sounds like yes, then we contact the spirit guide and so on, as if it was something very simple. For you, it certainly is, because you have studied it and have been practicing for a really long time now. But have you ever experienced that a person really has a problem with it, or where it is more difficult?
So what I often experience, which I find very nice, interestingly, many lawyers come to me. They sometimes come in and say, it certainly won't work for me because I'm so head heavy, or in such dry professions, if you will, like managers or all sorts of things. But I saw a TV show or happened to read a book and someone told me about it. I want to experience that too, but it probably won't work. And soul guidance, well, you don't need to come with that. I think, okay, I'll tell it anyway. Please read my 2 books. And then I have experienced it so often. We are not yet through childhood, and tough men and women begin to react with wow, because they feel their spirit guide, their guardian angel. Whether they see it or just feel it, they suddenly become aware of a greater presence. They are back to where they might have been as small children, where this connection was more present. They are actually tears of joy, being touched, and from there, wow, it happens, something so wonderful. I get goosebumps even now as I tell this, where I can only bow, grateful to be an instrument that can establish this connection.
When you tell me about it, these people can't continue living their lives the same way as before. What does it do to them?
I really hope so. I can't run along and see what they're doing now. So after each past life, whether it's a very fulfilling past life where one did super well in terms of their soul, or a messed up past life where there's great regret afterward, it always turns out well. As divine souls, we know again who we are. And there is so much joy, so much awareness, so much brilliance. It's simply fantastic. And from that comes the desire. Yes, I want this and that, and I can do this and that, and I will do it. And then I work out the next small steps towards that. It's like when we make New Year's resolutions, and from now on, I only eat healthy and exercise and everything. In 3 weeks, it's all over, and you're back to your old habits. And that simply brings a lot. When I say do this and that, you have a big goal. What are the next small steps towards it that are doable, that can be well integrated into everyday life? And I like being in the mountains, and I think, wow, the mountain is high. How am I supposed to manage that? And just those small steps that you take. An hour passes, 2 hours pass, and I've come this far. So the next steps are what's important. And you can do that. It works. It's wonderful. And many people, of course, come back again and again. Our workshops, I started with 1. Now there are already 7 because people don't want to stop. They say they benefit so immensely from it. As with everything, it's good. You add another little scoop. In my second regression book, Karma Coaching, there are many exercises, and I say you need to do 3 exercises at a time. Let's do 10 minutes and over again. Because everyday life naturally has a huge pull with many demands on us. And it is so important to always have something where we notice, yes, I can maintain the connection. There are also many exercises in it to maintain the connection to one's spirit guide. I call it spirit guide. You can also call it guardian angel, spirit guide. It's the same. This wonderful high instance. And when we do that and someone comes back, I always write down the question someone had, the problem someone had when they came. And many people say, I feel like not much has happened. The session says you didn't have a relationship back then. Now I have one. You had them in the mess, that's gone. Or you had to figure me out. No, I give lectures now and it's a bit like, thanks. A lot has happened. Absolutely wonderful.
Funny. Have you ever experienced that that it didn't work at all, that they really shut down, maybe out of fear of having to move or change?
Yes, there are more extreme examples, especially when someone realizes it works, where people quit and say, I don't want that.
Really?
Yes, because she had a person, I found that quite terrible, who came in a wheelchair. We then, so that he could even get in with us, my husband and I, he placed some wedges so that he could even drive up there with the wheelchair. And then it just shows that healing would absolutely be possible. A man in his early 30s, it's not so bad what he has. And if he works and does things properly, he can return to normal life and walk. And out of nowhere, he tore off the blindfold and said, but I don't want that. I don't want that. I want it to stay as it is now. There I have my livelihood, there I have my attention, and he almost became aggressive and left. I never heard from him again.
Interesting. Yes, but that surely doesn't happen often.
No, thank God, that almost never happens. Of course, the expectations are very different, and we have our egos, and when you watch movies and hear from others, it all seems to go wonderfully. For example, I had a family where the father, mother, and 3 daughters, all already adults, came, and everything went wonderfully. And then the 3rd daughter came, but she wasn't doing well at all. I said, that's not possible. And eventually it came through. She is not mature enough. She would have to change so much in her life and also want that. Then we worked on it, and little by little it came out. Yes, she should do this and that. Yes, you can think about it. There was no real willingness, and the spiritual world simply refused to let her continue traveling.
Wow. But I find that an incredibly important aspect, this willingness, that people feel an impulse within themselves. I want to experience this now. In my opinion, the very first step is I want to know now what shows up from these other lives is an initial impulse of I am ready to look deeper. And with that, the door is actually open to say, yes, I really give it space now. Also see what you described with the managers. Take that in, stand still. But the next point, the next hurdle from my perspective is truly another level of intensity of willingness. It means, are you really ready to change things in your life and truly take new steps, embrace new impulses, or see life in general differently? And you can really trust in that. I mean, fate will guide it one way or another, and then the person will be ready in the next life, roughly speaking, right?
It's not that simple because there is no standstill. It goes upwards or downwards. And when a life is something very precious, there is so much planning involved, so much belongs to it. And if I don't get going, everyone else who is waiting for me and wants to do a project with me, or whom I could positively influence in some way, I can't do any of that. That means the others then need plan B or C or whatever, because I've dropped out. It's the same as if you committed suicide before your time or something. You're just not there anymore. And it's not just like, I'll do it in the next life. The signs are then much harsher, and there are many more blows of fate. So, for example, if one is hard-hearted, meat from factory farming, the products hard-hearted, you donate nothing, you don't help, it doesn't matter. It is very possible that in the next life, for example, you might find yourself in a war zone or on a garbage heap, rummaging for a few bread crusts. It doesn't just stay quiet, but rather, if you don't notice it, then it has to be harder now, so that you realize how precious it is to have anything at all, to be grateful. You don't throw away food and things like that. So I would say the best guarantee for things to get better is that we do our best. And she says, the most joyful feeling. When I look at society here in the West, where we are doing so well with so much money, unfortunately, there is so much emptiness, dead faces. And when I focus on it, the soul is so far away, it doesn't come through, it feels okay. These people could be happy, they could have a radiance, they could be joyful with modest things, but they feel it lies in even more power, even more consumer behavior. They become emptier and unhappier, the pleasures more perverted, more broken. Just to feel anything at all, it's so sad. It doesn't have to be this way.
I think it's great that you're phrasing it this way now, because exactly these opportunities that it offers are these opportunities. And in the end, you do provoke, if you're lazy, you could almost say.
Laziness is bad karma.
Yes, when one makes themselves comfortable in all these things you just mentioned, it's also my work, where I try to really wake people up as much as possible in the truest sense of the word. Very, very, very important impulse. But what also interests me a lot is, what does this work do to Ursula? Just as a person, you have done this for so many years and had so many different experiences in one direction and the other. What does it do to a person when they observe, watch, and experience so many of these stories, these fates, these opportunities, and also the untapped potentials? How has it shaped you?
That is a very deep question. I was already born this way. So I know that most people say something happens to them at some point, and then I came into the world loving people, loving animals, loving nature. As a child, I already asked myself the questions: where do we come from? Where are we going? And for me, everything was always alive. And I tried to treat it with respect and love. And I believe a significant part is nature. I spend a lot of time in nature and also alone in nature, until I feel like I am now a part of nature. And more and more, the strength also came. As a child, I always wanted to become an explainer because I thought many people simply misunderstood things. And over time, it became more and more apparent from my search that I was able to find a lot within myself, and that there is a very strong connection to the spiritual world. And then such incredible things happened, like when people on the street spoke to me. And once a man came up to me in Munich, he was still very young, asking for directions. And I thought, yeah, he wants to get involved or something like that. He didn't want to. But then he came back and said, don't forget that you are an angel. You must never forget that. It was a big task. And that kept happening in different places where I thought, huh? What is this now? And over time, I grew into it. And then I started with spiritual regressions into past lives and realized that it goes much further into the between lives of a soul. I was allowed to be the first European graduate to complete the training with Michael Newton, Dr. Michael Newton. And when the training was finished, he held my husband back, me, and said, I want to tell you something. And then I can go again, he says to my husband. Your wife is one of the great healers of the earth. Support her, have her back. That was very good because computers, calculations, those things, I wasn't there at all as these. Thank God Gerhard helps me a lot with that. And then it went so quickly. Then came television, I never applied. Then came the book publishers, I never applied either. It all just came and became huge. And I always simply noticed I love people. You have to love people if you want to help them. Never their ego, that's dreadful. But the divine soul behind it, their potential, that's wonderful. And you may see that one is allowed to be an instrument. It is the fastest path to spiritual development that I know. The fastest and clearest. I have tried many things, know nothing that comes even close to being as fast if one has the will to implement it. And that is so nice because I can also see how people come somehow so gray, nondescript. Then they come back beautifully blooming. I always think at the workshops you should take a photo before and after. Dear God, it's like anti-aging. Suddenly there are interesting blooming faces, and no matter if we are fatter, thinner, taller, shorter, how old we are, it doesn't matter. It's the life that comes through, and that makes it beautiful. And that is truly wonderful. And what is important to me is to remain completely normal and humble, not to get carried away. That is something terrible. Well, I am not really part of the esoteric scene because I then ask people if they feel like they are already half a beacon. What do I know? Do you still eat meat? How much do you donate? How much volunteer work do you do? By their fruits, you will recognize them. And I often see people who are so modest and so natural and can achieve so much with a smile, but don't talk eloquently and whatnot. And that is a huge concern for me. Even when I train people, it is a huge concern for me. And I always hope that I succeed, at least for the most part, in ensuring that we don't believe we are more or less developed. We are all one. And you have to feel that again and again. It's like a leaf on a tree, which is no more than the branch, the tree, the garden in which it stands. It's simply, we grow into it more and more, recognizing that we are part of the divine source. We are part of creation, and we have a responsibility in it. That we, yes, support the divine creation and prove ourselves loving and worthy of it. And that makes one rather more modest and natural than lofty and frivolous, I would say, as a Swiss.
Now she's speaking of we again. The question was, but how do you feel now after all the work? Can I summarize? You have only blossomed in your energy over the course of this work, in all this giving and in all this.
Yes, because it always turns out well. It is the same in past lives. Many ask, yes, if I was a murderer or something, it is indeed possible. But he might have been a murderer or a warrior and cut off as many heads as possible. But it doesn't stop there. This warrior then dies, and then he realizes, my God, I didn't come to Earth to chop off heads. Instead, I was a good strategist. But as a good strategist, you can unite peoples instead of destroying them. And the wish, I want to make peace now, where I am. I want to contribute to peace, where I am as much as possible. What I notice for myself, I have become much stronger and clearer. And I can say no much better than before. That was very difficult for me.
I think so.
With the little stories, you could get anything from me. And at some point, I allowed myself to look deeper and realized it's just a sad little story to deceive you. Wake up. And I must say, I truly learned that sometimes a no is a greater act of love than a yes. And stopping someone and putting them in their place, if one can and it is possible, is important, is a greater contribution than letting everything slide.
But when you see these things in people, these potentials, I find it a very logical resonance that someone with such energy as you, who wants to give support and help people to flourish, to awaken or wake up, naturally has these impulses want to give. And then that is a logical conclusion that you also had to learn to say no, because I think that goes together. So I believe
Yes, absolutely. I had relatively few teachers. So the system too, what I do and what infinitely, so higher than anything in literature, I have a success rate. And I, thank God, had a few really good teachers. But, they say 90% of it was given to me and I refined it. And that brings me to something very essential. I am a very diligent person, a very consistent person. I can also wonderfully relax or lie in a deck chair or something. But I have absolute self-discipline, and that is simply part of it. The gift is truly a part, like all talents. 2/3 is diligence, constantly questioning, learning from good criticism, having self-criticism, thinking it is good. It can also be very good, and simply continuing to grow. And I live a very reclusive life. I sometimes enjoy being in company and hustle and bustle, but mainly I live very reclusively and choose the people with whom I share my free time very consciously. I really enjoy being with animals, very much in nature. I support the Animal Protection Organization. I've been involved from the beginning and know what happens with the money. And yes, I like making campfires, enjoy cooking, reading, but I know that at 12 years old, I read the existentialists, Camus, Sartre, and Simone de Beauvoir. Now, I also allow myself a Mickey Mouse, a romance novel for relaxation, Asterix and Obelix, where I just notice I don't see much terrible in the regressions, but more what humanity does. We are in the process of killing our planet, of slaughtering biological life. And that hurts me infinitely. And I pray a lot, ask a lot, that I contribute, that I get going myself, that I pass it on, that it is indeed nice when we look out for each other, that it is indeed wonderful, that there is nothing Christian about growing spiritually or coming into compassion. That is ultimately the deepest satisfaction there is. You want to feel the power that comes, the spiritual world, when it comes through, the divine soul. Those are the highest moments of happiness. It is wonderful.
Did you also try other methods on your journey of discovery, or did it really lead you directly there?
So I taught hypnosis at the university for many years, stress management, relaxation techniques. I learned some of it and also developed some myself. Motivation training, I did a lot of that. And at some point, there was a judge there, and he later went out to eat and said, "It's actually incredible what you incorporate in terms of personal development and spirituality into the regular lessons." I studied sports, studied dance. I was at the theater in Vienna, trained the musical people. And you do all this under such names, and you don't even notice it. But I notice how well I am doing. Or sometimes when students come and say, "I now dare to study what I love," and so on. But they were in conditioning training. I said, "I never did that." "Yes, yes, you did." I thought, I completely missed that, more between the lines.
But basically, you still went into regression methods relatively quickly, didn't you? There was a primal impulse. It could be that something, a spark, caught you as well.
Yes, that did even exist. That's what I wanted to do. Then I did it, and it stayed with me, so to speak. But then this dimension from Dr. Michael Newton came along, that you can travel to the spiritual world. I already knew that, but not that you can guide it and accompany others there. And so I also completed this training.
Exciting.
Yes, and I teach that now too, because I refined it again and I got the go-ahead from Michael Newton. He never wrote a foreword, he always said that. And then he wrote a foreword for my first book. And I was allowed, so to speak, to continue his method and have his blessing to do it quite differently now and thus reach many more people, right? I was able to realize we are all the same if one wishes, but we are still unique.
Through everyone differently and individual, and also as divine souls. And I have discovered so many approaches for many souls that travel much more abstractly than what is described in these books by Michael Newton. And they were previously left behind and thought, yes, it doesn't work for me. But of course it does, especially so. And so I was able to expand it so that every person, if the spiritual world allows it, and if they feel ready, and most do when they come, can really travel there and experience it.
So you developed it further.
Yes, because it is a different time again. It's always the same on the inside, but how we approach it or how we accompany it.
The language.
The language, it is simply a change again, and especially the spiritual world. You could say there is the soul. I'm often asked, is it male or female? It is, of course, androgynous. Or a soul guide looks like an angel, or looks like Merlin, or like an eagle, or a bird. Neither, but we, the soul, can be all, or the soul guide has no form or all forms he wants. But for us, since we are still very much anchored in our human consciousness, it helps a lot if we perhaps give it the form of an angel, or like Merlin, or like an eagle, or like a light, whatever comes. If that helps us, it's truly wonderful. But the spiritual world has no face, so we are allowed to take on many faces. If it helps us then to travel deeper and deeper to where we eventually realize I was already allowed to travel to areas. There is bliss, but there might still be sound or light, but there might be no perhaps very deep feelings, infinite insights, but then no more feelings. Further still, no more insights, no individuality anymore. It's very hard to name it, but it's so wonderful. You want to stay forever, but as soon as you name it a little, you fall back again. You're bound to the earth again, but it is boundless, timeless, eternal.
Is it also possible to bring regressions forward?
Yes, one of our workshops. So it's the fifth work of the fourth from the fourth workshop. These are options, future options, because I shape what I am experiencing now is what you could say the result of the past. And in the now, I plan or shape my future. But there is something like the grand plan of divine creation and also of the individual soul. And you can certainly tap into that. Or at least if I continue as before, how will it go on? If I do things differently now, set new courses, how will it go on then? And that generally day and night. So as an option, as joy, as gusto. Wow, if I apply this and that, then my future in the current life, but also in further incarnations, is completely different. I have much more strength, can achieve much more, and much more awaits me. Also joy, awareness.
That is what I consider the most important tool, this awareness of the actual tools we have with us anytime, every day. Does Ursula have any idea who she used to be?
So I myself have done over 92 regressions as a client in past lives, and of course many in between lives as a divine soul.
That's why you are perfect for my next question, namely, do different levels or other lives appear each time, or do you sometimes end up at the same 1, 2, or 3 times?
So I had a past life that I had already dreamed about several times, even before I ever knew that something like past life journeys existed. I also didn't know it was a past life. I just thought that in the morning, whenever I woke up, it affected me so deeply. So it wasn't really a normal dream, something like that. And when I did my first regression, this life actually came up at some point. But then with the one before, after, in between, so much. In the dream, I could only remember a few sequences. And then the whole range came, and then it came again later, and then never again. But there was so much. Yes, it's important for me to not only know it in my head, but to experience it again. Because in past lives, we experience ourselves as that person. We are fully in that body and experience it and do it. That was a very important one. Otherwise, various past lives come up. When we travel the spiritual world, it is often like this. We are naturally there. We are there as a soul. But what else we do there, or how we do it, or how it feels, and our powers. So it's like a spotlight that gets brighter and illuminates everything more deeply, and also sees the connections with all other light beings, souls, helpers that are there. Even there, it is limitless.
Of course, I definitely think so.
Have you ever had people in your regressions who have done really terrible things? I'm just taking a blatant example, any Hitlers and so on.
Yes, especially when you mention Wodочка, I regressed a person to a man who actually saw himself as a really bad guy. Like in the concentration camp and terrible, horrible human experiments, all sorts of things. And in the current life, so he is then back, of course, through the death scene, how he died. I believe he was shot in the past life. At some point, she refreshed him, and he was infinitely sad as a divine soul. He was not allowed to go far into the spiritual world for a very long time. He needed healing, help, and repentance as a divine soul for a very long time before he could return at all. And then he said something wonderful, and it also came through. You make life for him, make it so much better. He works with right-wing extremist youths. As a psychiatrist, that's a profession where everyone says you never have success. That's really terrible. These are mostly people who band together in groups and go after the weaker ones, often with alcohol and everything. And he says, now I also know why I have such patience with them and how I can help them. They want to do something, but they haven't found where it really leads. And he can show them ways to go towards the good, where a group is important and one's own strength and stepping out. And he left with a new enthusiasm to work even more with these young people to see what can be done. That really touched me.
I believe that healing actually happens in these moments within the soul, really right at that moment, because before it was subconscious that he didn't know, why am I doing this now? Why am I working with them? Then he has this aha moment from the regression, and now he knows even more what balances, what brings his soul back into balance from what he put into imbalance back then, which should fundamentally be value neutral, cosmically speaking, but was of course terrible. No question.
And for me, it was also so nice that he has his spiritual guide, because he knows he felt so infinitely sorry for what he did, but so incredibly. And he found himself so inferior and terrible. And his spiritual guide held him in his arms until he felt valuable, accepted, and loved again. I could just burst right now.
Those are the moments. Yes, those are them. You make things possible. It's really great work, honestly. Wow. Have you ever experienced reunions? Probably quite often. So I think re-encounter where a person says, yes, I know him, or somehow he seems familiar to me.
Yes, again and again. Many come, of course, with the romantic hope of finding the great love there and so on. Often it turns out that maybe it was the great love in a past life today, my annoying little brother. So one would like it to be the same age and man and woman again. That is mostly not the case. We incarnate in, you could say, usually with several, like our soul families, soul groups, sometimes also completely alone, but that is very rare, but under completely different circumstances. Now you are the mother, now I am the father, now it is the great love that leaves me, and so on and so forth. We have different tasks again. It should not just be a repetition, but it is often wonderful when someone simply recognizes someone else. You have to be very careful when someone believes they can infer something from back then. You were my great love, and isn't that handsome guy who's new in the office? He must love me again. Oh, you treated me so badly back then. Now I can behave terribly in our marriage today. Of course, things like that don't work. It is then my task as a regression leader to really sense that. And as long as one is in the spiritual world on the soul level, to make it clear. Attention, this has to go very differently now.
Have you ever experienced that people have had encounters in these regressions where they said, I definitely don't want to go deeper into that now. I never want to have anything to do with this person again or remember this encounter?
Well, I think we are free as a soul to see if we, once our karma is clear, still want to be with this person and under what conditions.
If it is bad karma, if we are, so to speak, the perpetrator, and these people are now back, we must definitely treat them with appreciation and respect. If these people are no longer there, or they do not want to be with us anymore because they think, he has done so much to me, I don't want to be with him anymore. But do something good on behalf of others, for other people, for other animals, for another piece of nature, because they might not want to anymore or have long since moved on or live somewhere else. But you can do something good on behalf. Many people get stuck in self-pity because it's a convenient way not to get moving. It doesn't make you happy, but it's somehow widespread in our society, where I think we have everything, but we are so dissatisfied, rarely in a society, and it's always others' fault, from the government to the mom to the neighbor who sings so loudly, and you'll find everything if you want reasons. It just doesn't help you. And one of the most important and essential things, that's why I go through current life. We have all done things where we would later say, I won't do that again. For heaven's sake, I'm sorry. And things were done to us where we think, that was definitely not great. That was nasty and mean and brutal. But it doesn't help to stay stuck there. And I always call it harvesting the gift. What is the good thing now that my mom put me in a home? And I have, for example, learned to forgive. I have, for example, learned to say about my children, I will never put them in a home. I have, for example, learned to find friends in the home and to appreciate and like the caregivers. I may have learned to be more loving today as a residential educator and to notice what is needed. I may have learned to still find my strength and eventually wake up to take my life into my own hands. And there is a lot. That is the gift behind it. And then I want to say, a mistake that we regret and make amends for is a step in development. And to let go and say, you have bad karma there, you need to bring it into the light, not me. I keep going and I still come into bloom, now more than ever. And I just do a few regressions or, in extreme cases, therapy, but I don't remain stuck as a victim and I don't become a perpetrator and take someone else home. Being an adult from a spiritual perspective means you are neither a victim nor a perpetrator. You are the self-determined creator of your life in the sense of your divine soul.
Self-responsible, and there is no one else who does it for you, but you are called to do it yourself and find millions of possibilities.
Yes, and support and everything possible. And we are never alone. And many people also simply tell me they have the feeling they came to Earth to do something great. I say, yes, what is that? Then nothing more comes, just something great. And some say they come and know they could be healers or they could be anything. And then I look meditatively and think they need self-healing first.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there is simply a definition of a desire that might even be based on a good foundation, but the path to it involves learning a lot, developing oneself, giving up many things, self-discipline, perseverance. So all words that are not very popular.
It's not an easy path, but in my opinion, it tests how much you want it.
With what strength you go into the matter.
With what real intention do you want your energy?
Yes, and really search until you find, but you have to search. Or if you know, for example, when I have a session or a workshop, I go to bed very early the night before, even if it would be great to go out or be with friends, or I prepare myself. Or when I wrote my books, I was simply not available for everyone else for months. I work a lot on a volunteer basis. I also work a lot for animal protection. I stopped eating meat, even though I really love it, so a praline makes me really happy. But first I need something recent to stop there. So I just stopped out of love for the animals because it's so terrible what is done. But at the same time, I realized it was a gift to me, funnily enough, after the energy of these tormented animals was no longer in me. I was really lifted up.
In my opinion, that's a matter of frequency.
Yes, and I simply stopped out of love for animals, out of love for others. And you can already see giving and receiving are one. So much love comes back to you. Also, so much protection, partly so much support.
There I can often only bow and give thanks. My God, there are beautiful things and so-called coincidences and wonderful arrangements. Oh my.
Yes, that's exciting. In your opinion, is there such a thing as a God?
A beautiful question. I think God and love are overused and abused terms. That's why I call it the divine source, all that is the primal source, the eternal light. So,
A consciousness.
yes, I would say, of course, God exists, but yes, God is all that is. So not like any religion and judgment as power, human power, just to live their power, like to tell us, but it is like the divine soul.
How could I be reborn if I don't have a divine soul? And as I said, if we are allowed to continue traveling into the spiritual world, that is an experience of God. You know, there is God, and whether you call it God or not, because you simply think this term has unfortunately been used very often, I still call it God, but I often explain how I mean it and say, you can call it something completely different within yourself, just so I know what I mean by it. But that is what we are, of which we are a part. We are not God, but we are a part of it. And thus the drop in the ocean becomes the whole ocean. Where does the drop end? Where does the ocean begin?
You mentioned earlier or hinted that we have free will on Earth. Do you fundamentally believe that we have free will?
Yes, I would like to say of all biological life on Earth, humans have the greatest free will. An animal, for example, a cat, catches a mouse. It can't do otherwise. That's its task, to catch the mouse, and that's it. It can't think, today I'll eat something else or do this. We humans have so much awareness and so much free will. That's why the animal always remains innocent. We can be guilty because we can do to a large extent. We can't suddenly say, I want to have all other parents.
It doesn't work. How is that supposed to work? But with many things, there are, of course, circumstances. But within that, we have infinite choices. We could set up something completely different at any time.
Karma with all karmic consequences, good or bad. Karma?
Yes, exclamation mark, not comma.
3 exclamation marks. Sylvia, 3 exclamation marks. And many tend to forget that. And everything we give comes back to us. That is as far as free will goes. And the most beautiful thing is when you realize, not my will be done, but your will be done.
That is then another level of perception.
When you enter this letting go, or rather, acceptance comes because one has realized that what aligns, what comes to you is through the impulses you have given. So when you say it comes back if it is good, if it is beneficial,
Yes.
then you completely get out of this flow.
And you asked earlier what has changed in Ursula. So in me, it has changed. I used to always make sure that people liked it. She had huge success and thought, then you are good. Then at some point, I strengthened myself and thought it should also please me. That was still a long way. I also enjoyed it in my teaching, and I was not only giving, but I thought I enjoy it, I find it great, I can also relax. And today it is like this. I connect with the spiritual world. I ask to be a good tool, to be guided by the spiritual world. And I no longer hold myself accountable to people, but to the spiritual world. And sometimes there are people who say, that was so wonderful. I think, yes, it was good, but I could have done it even better from their perspective. Or they think it wasn't that great. I expected more, but I realize from a spiritual perspective, it was wonderful.
And I think that counts for me.
The instance up there. And not so much anymore, because with people, the ego always comes in, and that is something completely different. And I try, and I thank God that I succeed, to simply be a good tool.
You've often emphasized this regarding animals. Have you ever experienced animals in regressions? Are they a part of it?
I love the animals. Many animals have already passed away, and at, I would like to say, impossible places during a regression where I was allowed to be the client, the same animals appeared.
Nice.
Or gave me messages or helped me. Quite extraordinary. So I have the feeling that, because I love them so much, many animals support me. Or like when I wrote my first book, it was I was in the process of writing it. I received an offer from a publishing house to write a book about spiritual regression. And I was still considering, I love the animals, but does that fit in there? How does that fit in there? Should I write it or not? And then I had a regression, and a client was in a past life. Then he went beyond death into the spiritual world as a soul. There it is actually only beautiful. And suddenly he says there's a tower, but it looks really eerie, so he doesn't really know. I thought to myself, in the spiritual world here, nothing looks eerie, But then I thought, well, that's coming from him. Now let's go there. He says, there are lots of animal carcasses in there. And then suddenly said, that a message is for you, not for me. True. You are currently writing a book and considering whether to include the animals. You absolutely should include the animals. The animals are very important. There is no spiritual development at the expense of the animals. And then he spoke again in a normal voice. Experienced wonderful things. I sat next to him, folding. I never told him that I'm writing a book, never that I'm having such consideration. He didn't even know that I love animals. He knew nothing about me and tells me that. I was really taken aback. I thought, okay, thank you.
I got it. The chapter will be included.
Wow, nice, exciting.
I'm also logically interested in the animal world because I find them so in need of protection. There is the purest love that flows there. And yes, just fascinating. I wanted to know if they have generally appeared in regressions. And have you ever experienced that maybe clients have been reincarnated as animals?
Very, very rarely. So, in my experience, and also from many colleagues in America, these are different incarnation cycles. It's not better or worse.
No, of course.
But it is something different. However, it can happen that we take a trip into an animal and incarnate there, or enter with our spirit and then come out again, or animals become part of us, or become human. That is possible, but these are exceptions.
Very rarely.
Very rarely.
Speaking of exceptions, is it also an exception when you have regressions where the souls find themselves on other planets? Or is that rare, or is that often?
Hybrid souls, as the term hybrid souls was coined by Michael Newton, are not that rare.
Really?
Maybe it's hard to estimate now, because you don't know them all, but from my experience, 8%, 10%.
But what exactly is a hybrid soul?
So, as if the greater whole divides and now into souls that want to incarnate as humans. Now, the human souls come to planet Earth, repeatedly to Earth, until they have completed the reincarnation cycle, or then they come perhaps as healers, as spiritual guides for a project. Now, there are also souls that have never incarnated on Earth. They have incarnated, so their home planet is another planet. But maybe the planet was destroyed, or they completed the reincarnation cycle there, or they are taking some trips to Earth, wanting to experience something here, or bring in something of themselves, of their knowledge from their planets. They then come to Earth and it is not their home. At first, they often feel, this place is very strange to me. This is something very odd here. They do not necessarily have to be mature souls, not at all. It can be that they are mature souls and bring a lot of good. But it can also be the opposite. So often it is the case, especially because we have free will here, that a soul not used to free will experiences a power rush and just acts, where the emotional body, the compassion, is very underdeveloped, you could say, where a lot of suffering happens. So both are possible, and I often encounter souls from both sides.
You mentioned you're talking about the reincarnation cycle. Do you have any statistics on how long such a cycle is, or is that impossible to say?
Well, I would say some. Everything you have planted, you must harvest. So everything you have given out, you must also eat. But some only harvest a flower pot full, that they have. So you must bring it to completion. For example, you cannot say, relationships are not for me. The last wife I poisoned, in another life I always cheated on the husband, and so on, where I say, no, with relationships I'd rather not.
That means you must keep practicing until you are able to live a harmonious, fair relationship. But then maybe for one person, they fill a thimble and say, it's good. Another fills a swimming pool, another a huge lake. So some souls keep coming back in different eras and parts of the earth. In any case, it is much, much longer than one might think. So if someone says, I have already been 35 times, then any ancient soul, as would say, start with hundreds and thousands. It was quite exciting when I started with the work, which was roughly like this. Back then, it was already double upwards. Homo sapiens have been around for 35,000 years. Today, we are over 70,000 at 120,000. It's a bit fluid which Homo we still count, but you notice, yes, we have been around for eternal times. It's not just so short. And the extraterrestrial souls, that is partly very, very exciting. They naturally bring in many aspects of possibilities, great possibilities for development, but partly also a heartlessness and brutality that is appalling. And of course, the incarnation cycle of Earth, of the planet Earth, is also coming to an end. It would be nice if we humans did not destroy the planet Earth before its time. We are in the process of doing so. We have already destroyed a lot. Very bad. But every planet, every sun is a coming and going. And it would be nice if we treated planet Earth with respect, with regard, seeing all creatures, fellow creatures in it, as part of the divine whole, ending animal husbandry, especially. And it would, of course, be truly wonderful if we could grow into the bigger picture. If we don't, I would like to put it differently, because you asked about extraterrestrial life.
There are very many.
Other planets where there is also life, and there are possibilities of non-biological life, which is not the spiritual world, but rather, if you will, incarnations with gases and completely different mat with completely different elements. So where one is not in biological life. And the earth vibrates very low and very dark, and it should be very high and very bright. It should be an example. We as humanity should achieve that. The earth should be an example of how to find harmony in voluntary cooperation. It should be an example for the universe. And currently, it is more like something where one says, here sit the barbarians who destroy everything, even their own planet, out of sheer stupidity for themselves, for their children, and for their own incarnations. Soon we won't need to ask ourselves anymore, will I reincarnate again, or am I already enlightened? Certainly not here anymore.
How do you know all these things? Is it something that has formed and reached you over the course of lives of regressions within you? Or is it something you learn from your meditations and your work?
Hardly through my past lives.
Mm.
Through my travels, through the universe, through what I do as a soul, through the accesses of the spiritual world that shows and communicates this to me and also leads me to truly see and experience it.
And also through the many clients who come where I'm allowed to learn. I learn with every client. I really have over, I think it's going to eventually now, I always think it's too late, but I believe it's slowly approaching 7,000. The fascination with what everyone experiences there. I travel inwardly with them. Wow.
Speaking of traveling along, I can only confirm that over the course of my journey, also the exploration, which I like to call an exploration journey, I have logically also experienced many healers and workshop providers and schools. And I ended up with Ursula, and she was ultimately my keystone, this journey of experience outward. And she really brought me back into my power, balanced and restored me. And all of this with such a beautiful, grounded and not outlandish form of spirituality. completely real, completely grounded, as I already said, tangible for me. For me, one of the keystone of this journey. And I can only recommend to anyone who feels somehow addressed by this to try a regression. Do it, because now is now. We live in this time. Ursula is here now. Exactly as you say, don't wait too long, because in the next incarnation, these opportunities might not present themselves, or it might be harder to find them. Now, today and here, you are listening to this podcast and have the opportunity to feel within yourselves if this might be something for you. So please follow this impulse if it forms. With that, I would like to, unfortunately, I have to, even though I would love to keep talking with you forever, but we'll just do it. We'll make another episode, then we'll continue talking. You are also welcome to ask us questions, especially to Ursula, which we will discuss. Can you send it to me? But Ursula, lastly, what would you like to share with people after all that you have just revealed about yourself, your vast knowledge, and your great work? What would you like to impart to people as they finish listening to the podcast, the episode?
I would like to encourage them to find peace, to pray, to meditate, to stop eating meat, to embrace compassion, which is also important, to find joy in life at every moment, and to develop gratitude. I would also like to give them an exercise for this. I call it the exercise of reducing, so that we learn to feel again how privileged we are to be allowed to be here. We are not banished to earth as punishment.
It is a huge opportunity to develop here, and it is wonderful. Despite all the suffering, this is a magnificent planet.
And that we feel better again when you are thirsty or drink something. Wait until you are really thirsty and then drink consciously and with gratitude. When you are hungry, wait to eat until you really feel hunger and until even very simple things taste really good. And then eat consciously and with gratitude. When going to bed, not just go to bed now, wait until you feel tired and then consciously, my cozy little bed, my pillow, oh, this is nice, I have a bed. When you're cold, wait until you're freezing and then the jacket. I have a jacket, I'm doing well, thank you. Coming into awareness and gratitude.
When one is conscious, in my opinion, one naturally becomes so grateful for all this beauty. It can't be any other way, right? But decide for yourselves. Thank you very much, dear Ursula, for this great session, for these wonderful insights from you.
Thank you too, dear Sylva. It was an absolute pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, thank you. We really got to know you a little more and your great work a bit better. I'm looking forward to next time. Thanks for listening, everyone. And I would like to remind you to join our community Spine. We are a community that wants to help you live a healthier life, practice your spirituality, and expand your consciousness. We help you find and connect with healers around the world, and we help you give your life a new meaning in different ways. We are Spine, connections that help.